All right, let's take a look at HTTP server 1. So I got the impression that people found this one a bit frustrating. Am I wrong?
You are not wrong.
Yeah. So luckily, this is one of those things that we're teaching it to you because it's, it'll help you give you better understanding and appreciation of what goes into an HTTP server, but you're very unlikely to actually have to make one from scratch. It's kind of like if you were trained to be a mechanic and you wanted to assemble a car engine from scratch. You don't really have to do that to your day-to-day. They usually have factories for that, but it's important to take it apart and know how it works. So I'm going to kind of go through this a little step by step. So we have server.py and we see the following: import socket, server equals socket.socket, which is socket.afinet, socket.sockstream. So afinet defines the address family we want to be able to use, and sockstream is the type of socket we want to use. We don't really need to worry about the ins and outs of those. Then we need to bind our server to a host and a port. Our host is localhost, and localhost is like a shortcut for your IP address. It's the address of your local machine. And then we're binding it to port 9292, which is an arbitrary port number. We can put any 4-digit number there. And then we tell the socket to start listening with server.listen. And then when we get a connection, we have client connection here as one argument, and this thing right here, client address. We set those equal to server.accept, which accepts the connection. We print it out, and then we close the connection. So if I run this file, Python server.py, this is waiting for connection, so that the connection is going, and then we need to be able to connect to it. So we could do that through our browser. We could also do that using a software using Postman or curl. So I'm going to use curl for this one. So I'm going to open up a new tab here. And I'm going to curl to HTTP localhost 9292. So here it says connection reset by peer. But here it tells me it received the connection and then just immediately closed it like we programmed it to do. So that just made a GET request to this server that we created. So now we need to refactor it to do something more interesting. We need to respond to every request with hello world. To do this, we're going to use client connection variable to send and receive data. So client connection is a socket object. We can read through the documentation to find some methods that can send data. We highlighted this as a hint. So I go to the documentation here. I look for send. We can see some methods. There's one right here called s1.send. So here's the send. So it says send data to the socket. The socket must be connected to a remote socket. The optional flags argument has the same meaning as receive. Returns the number of bytes sent. Applications are responsible. So we're doing something called bytes. Okay, so let's try this out before we do anything else. So we can just say client connection.send hello world, and let's see what happens. So it's waiting for a connection. And then if I curl, I get a failure connection reset by peer. And we have an error here. It says a bytes-lite object is required, not str. So I gave it a string. It didn't have that, but it says it needs a bytes-like object. Okay. So what are bytes? If I do Python bytes, so it's a method. So bytes returns a method of a mutable bytes object initialized with given by data. So that doesn't really help me much, I think. But what are bytes? So it conforms to the former str type in Python 2. It is a binary serialization format represented by the sequence of 8-bit integers that is fit for storing data on the file system or sending it across the internet. So we need to turn this string into bytes. Did anyone find a method that can do that for us?
Encode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a method called .encode. And if we run the server now and then ping it, all right, so we still have a failure. We didn't get hello world. Okay, we didn't get an error here.
No, you did get hello world, but it's at the beginning of your.
Oh, yep, there it is. Thank you, I missed that. Yeah, so we encode our string and then send it through the connection. Okay, that's pretty cool. So we've successfully completed our first request response cycle. That cycle is what the whole internet is built on. So right now our server quits after sending a single response. We need to keep our server running so it can handle multiple requests. So to do that, we can set up a while loop. So here's our code here. We need to make it set up a while loop. Where should that while loop go? I'm assuming it should probably go after we bind the host, right? And then we can just do that. So let's try that and see if it works. Oh, while true. So now if I curl, all right, that doesn't look good. Well, it says, okay, we got the new connection received, waiting for connection. I'm not seeing a hello world though. And this thing is kind of caught in a loop now. So I think we also need to make sure that our client connection.close is also part of that. Because otherwise our client kind of gets stuck. Let's try it again. I'm going to reset the server. Waiting for connection. All right, so it says connection reset by peer here. But our server is still up. So we can keep on pinging it and still keep getting hello world. All right. What questions do you have about simple server 1 so far? Okay, let's take a look at release 1 now. So right now we are responding with a simple string. Let's modify our code to respond with a standard HTTP response. So in order for our response to show up in Chrome, we need to format it to include at least the following things. We need HTTP protocol, so i.e. status HTTP 1.1 status code reason phrase. We need the content type, the content length, then a blank new line, which we do with \r\n, and then the body of our response. All right, so we have an HTTP hint here. The below is a string representation of the protocol. So here we have HTTP 1.1, 200 OK, RN, content type text, HTML. So let's use that as the basis for a function. So I'm going to copy out this. I'm going to write a function here. I'm going to call this one build HTTP response. And we're going to say, put that there. So we need the HTML text. So let's say HTML equals, and then we can say, or we can call this HTML text equals, and we can say HTML body p tag hello world, and then get the end tags. And then we could say return. And then we're going to make sure it returns HTML text. Nope, we need to make sure that that's here. All right, something's breaking it. What's happening here? Well, first it's return, not retrun. Whoop, okay, whoop. What am I doing wrong? Not sure why these are turning red.
So parentheses after HTML text.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Thank you. There we go. So we build out an HTML, which is just a simple HTML tag with a body and a p tag with hello world. And then we return our string, which has HTTP 200 OK, then a new line, content type text / HTML, a new line. Content length is the length of HTML text, and then 2 new lines, and then our actual text itself. So any questions about how this is working? All right. And then we can say, instead of encoding hello world, we can encode build HTTP response, like so. So I reset the server, run it again. If I ping it, I get my HTML text. And now that that's working, I should be able to view it in my browser as well. And there it is, hello world. So it's just plain text, just a HTTP headers and then the body encoded and sent to the client. All right, so now we need to make this a little bit more advanced. We are currently ignoring the request. We want our server to be able to respond in different ways depending on what kind of request the client gets. So let's check the socket documentation to find a method that allows us to recv data from the client. Okay, so let's take a look at that recv method that they pointed us to so subtly. So recv receives data from the socket. The value is a byte, return value is a byte-sized operative. So it seems like it's the opposite of .send. So let's try this out. I'm just going to print out client connection.recv and see what we get. So restarting the server. Okay, something. Let's see what happened here. It says recv takes at least one argument, 0 given. So it says right here it takes a buff size. It says right here the value of buff size should be a relatively small power of 2, for example, 4096. Okay. 4096. Again, I'm going to ping the server. We got our response back. We can see here, here's our request that we got. So it's a GET request to HTTP1. So this B stands for bytes. So this is another thing of bytes. So this is our GET request. So if I want to change it from bytes to a string, I can do the opposite of encode, which is decode. I hate it when it does this. There we go. Make another request. So here's our GET request right here. And it says right here, actually, yeah, you'll have to use .decode UTF-8. And it looks like .decode without the UTF-8 works all right as well. So now we need to change our behavior of our method depending on what the URI is. So where is the URI in this request?
After
This
get.
is the host.
I heard somebody say after get, and then Emma, you were saying something?
The host. Is it the host?
Yeah, so in this case, the URI is this, the slash, and the host is specifically where the server is. So if we combine localhost 9292 with our URI, we get the URN. So these are related, but in this case, we're looking for this particular thing. So how do we get, so, and this right now is a string. So how can we get this particular piece of data, this particular character out of our string? And let's save this as a variable for now. So req equals, so how do we get from req to URI?
Split and take index 1.
Yeah, so we could split it. So if we print out req dot split, and then get something at index 1, let's see what we get. Waiting for connection, ping the server. There it is. Great. So we're going to get two different URIs. One is going to be the hello world. The other one is going to be what the current time is. So we should change our build HTTP response based on what the URI is. So we can give it URI as an argument and say if URI equals slash. I'm going to set HTML text to this. And I got to make sure I define HTML text before that. What the heck? And then we can say elif URI equals slash time. We need to set HTML text to something else. So I'm still going to set up the regular HTML body. How do we get the current time, though? Does anyone know how to get the current time in Python?
Import time.
Yes, we can import time. And let's take a look at the Python time library. All right, so if I wanted to do current time. Okay, so there's a function here called local time. It says like GM time, it converts to local time. If sex is not provided or none, the current time is returned by time is used. Okay, what is time? Time.time. Return the time in seconds since the epoch is a floating point number. Okay, that doesn't help us. So let's try local time instead. So we could say time equals, like we call it current time. Time equals time.local time. And then in here, I'm going to say current time. Let's try that out, see if it works. This time I'm going to use the browser. So, uh-oh, we have a problem. We forgot to give the URI when we call on this one. So we need to say pass in req.split1 to our function so that it can actually make a decision based on that. Every time, I hate this. It is not in use.
That was the majority of my frustration yesterday.
There we go. So there's localhost 9292. I add /time. Okay, that's not exactly what I want. It looks accurate, but I think we need to have a better way of formatting that. Let's see if there's a way of formatting code. So a function called strip time. Parse a string representing a time according to a format. So they have an example here. So we could say in here, instead of just giving it current time, we could say time.strp time, and we'll give it current time, and then let's do it hour minute. So we do it, I believe it's %h %m. Let's see if that works. Invalid syntax. All right, so that isn't very helpful. Why is it invalid? Doesn't need like that.
It uses a different module. You have to import date.
Okay, import date time. And what do I do with date time?
What you have is fine, I think.
Okay. Now it's still saying I'm having invalid syntax. Let's try the datetime module. Let's see if that is a little bit easier. Datetime Python. So we do datetime. I believe datetime has a function called now. So datetime.now returns the current local date and time. And it's also got something called strf time, which allows us to format it. So maybe instead of the time module, we do current time equals, do datetime.now. Actually, it's datetime.datetime.now. It's a little annoying. I don't know why they do that. And then we could say .strf time. I'm going to set this to %8, %h colon %m colon %s. And then here we just give it current time. Let's see if that works. All right, refresh this page. There we go, our current time. Thank you, Emma. All right, so now we have essentially a time page and a home page. What questions do you have so far about release 2, parsing the request? Okay, so let's take a look at release 3, single responsibility. So at this point, we haven't really separated our concerns because our server does more than it should. It's receiving a request, parsing the request, and sending a response. So let's make our code follow the single responsibility principle a bit better by creating a request class that parses the request that comes in. So I'm going to touch request.py. Going to make a class called request. And so they give us some stuff here. So init takes self and a request text. And it calls on a method called parse request using request text at recv4096.decode.split. And then we need to parse request so that we return something like this. All right, so I'm going to say def init. We'll have it take self and request text. And then we'll say, all right, self.parseRequest, taking in request text.recv4096.decode.split. We can always change this later, but I'll take their advice here for now. And then I'm going to make def parse request, takes in self and decoded text as an argument. And for now, I'm just going to have it pass. So based on this thing, what do we think they mean by request text? Where is that coming from in our server?
The client connection.
Yeah. So it seems like we're going to be passing in client connection to our request object. So I'm going to say from request, import request. And instead of REQ and all this stuff, I'm going to just delete all this for now. I'm going to say request equals a new request object that takes in client connection as an argument. So we need to parse this text into an object that includes our localhost, URI, all of that. So before we do anything like that, let's just print what we're working with. So if I run the server and then ping it, we got an empty reply, that's fine. Okay, so currently our decoded text is an array with here's one part, get slash HTTP1, it's got host, localhost, these are all strings. So how can we turn this array of strings into an object? What's the best way? We could just do it, we could hard code it, right? That would be simple. Is there another way we could do it? We can also, change how we parse this thing here as well. So what I'm thinking is, I'm just going to change this so that we're just splitting on spaces instead of line breaks. So that instead of each line, we get just each word. And I think that'll get us a little more freedom as to how to turn this into a object or a dictionary. So I'm going to say self.parseRequest equals an object. And then we're going to say parsed request, and we'll say URI equals decoded text 1. We also need a host, so we could say parsed request host equals decoded text, and that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is a little hard coding it a little bit, but it'll work. User agent equals decoded text 6. And accept is going to equal decoded text 8. So I'm going to try this out. So I'm going to say, after we make request, I want to print out request dot parsed request and see if it comes out in the format we want. I don't know why I keep doing that. Waiting for connection, and then we ping it. We get an empty reply. Uh-oh, okay. Parsed request is not defined. On line 7. Oh, does anyone see what I did wrong here?
You have none of it inside of the curly boys.
Yeah. And also, I didn't add self to the front of all of these. Look, the server is empty. There's nothing there. Let me connect. There we go. Ping it. There we go. URI is / host is localhost 9292. User agent is curl, and accept is this thing, meaning anything. All right. And the other thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this build HTML response is also part of this. So I'm going to cut this from here. Do some indenting. Make sure it takes self as an argument. And now we can just be able to, now it has access to the URI through parsed request. So we could say if self.parsedRequest URI equals that, elif self.parsedRequest URI equals time. And either way, we're going to return the same value. So now that we have that, we should just be able to go client connection. And actually, let's make it so that it returns it and encodes it as well. So we'll return this and dot encode. So now I should be able to say client connection dot send request dot build HTTP response. So if we get hello world. All right, so the time one didn't work. Uh-oh, let's figure out why. Oh, date time is not defined. I need to put it in here. Import date time. Come on. There we go. And there we get the current time. All right, what questions do you have about single responsibility with the HTTP server?
Are you going to be doing a pull request for this?
I can, yeah.
That would be really helpful.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so I'm going to stop recording for now.